Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Living with FASD, Candid Conversations with Patty Casper. I am your host, and I have both professional and living experience with FASD. And this show is an educational and human interest show for those who are impacted by prenatal alcohol exposure, their family and loved ones, and anyone else interested in learning more about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. So this week, well, let me back up. I have tried to mix it up with my guests and have both professionals, whether they be psychiatrists or psychologists or researchers or whoever, on as guests, but also to have lots of people who are living with FASD. And tonight, I'm so excited because I'm having a couple on. One is a researcher and one is living with FASD. So without further ado, I want to introduce everyone to Justin Shepard and Kristina Uban. So welcome to you guys. Do you want to share a little bit more about how you guys are connected to FASD?
Yeah, thanks for having us. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay, so I think it started it started with me pursuing a graduate degree, a doctoral degree with Joanne Weinberg, Lisa Galea in British Columbia. And the primary focus of my dissertation was looking at teratogens and the lasting outcomes on, neurophysiological systems underlying stress responsivity and how that could cross over and sensitize reinforcement and motivational neurocircuitry, which people commonly refer to as the reward circuitry.
Thank you. I was going to ask you to put that into layman's terms.
So in reward circuitry, which would be, this question of does being different in the way you respond to stressors make you more susceptible to have a substance use disorder yourself?
Yes.
And so I did that with rats, and it was all on prenatal alcohol exposure in male and female rats and looking at brains and, going to conferences, listening to people with FASD with lived experiences. But it was very much it was very much a clinical population that was very defined by facial dysmorphology, low IQ, can't live alone independently. And it was very, specific on certain attributes that you find on the spectrum. And so now flash forward, we now realize the spectrum is much bigger than what a lot of researchers think. And I still see that as a huge limitation in FASD research. But that's really our first connection, was that I did my PhD in it. And then I went on to do a postdoc, and I have a lab now for 5 years at University of California, Irvine, where I study FASD.
Okay. There's so much in that, right? So that's really exciting stuff. And I'm very grateful that, you've recognized the leap that segment you had been looking at is just a small segment, right? Because I still run into people who, I read there's so many medical providers and clinical providers up here where I live that are like, when their foster parents bring their kids, oh no, they don't have that. They don't have the face.
Yep. Well, so then, that really is who has been represented in research. And so when I was training as a doctoral student, a postdoctoral fellow, and then even when I started my own independent lab that I've had for 5.5 years now, it really is the clinical representation in academic research. So then I guess our story, really, our personal story really begins in 2020.
Yeah, or maybe even 2018, when a group of parents and caregivers approached Kristina that she had worked with in the past to try and start a awareness campaign via media, film or video. And so at the time I had a production company in LA, a little small one, that we had done several different shoots and stuff, but never really tackled anything like this. And Kristina mentioned that maybe I could be helpful in some way. So I started interviewing with some people in the community, um, yeah, I my first interview I had really is what, you know, as we got into some of the other facets of FASD that I had never really, I mean, I've always been on the side of research and hearing about, like, you know, the intricate details of the neuroscience behind it, and
Yeah.
all of that stuff, right? So but I had never really stepped back and you know, widened the scope of this whole topic, um and, you know, realized the impact that it has socially, economically, you know, the prison aspect, you know, the
Yeah.
school public education aspect. I mean, you know, the side of FASD that I had always seen was just, you know, talking again back to about, like, you know, the facial dysmorphology. I hadn't really, because I hadn't really taken in the breadth of the whole spectrum of
Yeah.
FASD and what it, you know, what it is. And I think even people that are steeped in it, like Kristina, you know, I mean, you tend to, you know, researchers and people living with it, advocates, whoever you are, I mean, it kind of, over time, it narrows down to a pinpoint, right, to where you see FASD as that, right? And, like, when you really look at it as a whole, I mean, it blew my lid off, and I was like, this is more than just a video. This is like a whole docu-series of stuff. And
Yeah.
but, you know, then the pandemic happened, and it was kind of on the back burner of us trying to figure out how we were going to go about, you know, producing this, you know, video campaign. And I was trying to interview people over Zoom, and trying to get that, but it's just, you know, it's hard to make a quality product
Yeah.
over Zoom, for a film anyway, for
Yeah.
an at-length film, right? Like, watching
Yeah.
a whole bunch of Zoom interviews is a bit
Tiring.
tedious for viewers.
Yeah.
Um anyway, I had an interview with Dan Dabowski, and it was very enlightening and very inspiring. And we were talking about the RAND study that had released, about the uptick in maternal drinking being up 41% from the pandemic,
Yeah.
and thought, well, maybe we should just do it. So we started with our own money. We, you know, bought a really nice camera. I coaxed my brother into coming and living with us and going on the road with me during the middle of a pandemic, and all the George Floyd stuff was happening, the election,
Yeah.
a lot of stuff was happening. We actually left and started our trip on November 4th, on the day of the election. And so traveling across the country in that time was very, very interesting, but that's, I
Yeah.
digress.
Did you have a motorhome at least?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
so that's why the FASD
Yeah.
the FASD project, the logo is an RV, because we traveled it all the
Gotcha.
way around the US.
They
And
slept in, like, Proof Alliance's parking lot during the riots. And, like, you know, I mean, they slept all over. I mean, people
Yeah.
hosted them everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also in the Lewy body dementia circles because of my mom's issues, and they also have like two of the main. In fact, it's a podcast called the Lewy Body Roller Coaster, and the two hosts are in a documentary for Lewy body, and they're doing a lot of the same things you guys are, as you know, fundraising. You know, the short is out, the trailer is out. I think they're due to release their full length sometime this spring.
Nice.
But you know, it, and the whole bit about, does it focus where you initially thought it would focus, and things do change amidst production. But yeah, that crew was also traveling in a motorhome over the last couple years.
yeah,
So
it's a great way to do it when you have,
yeah,
I mean, it was just me and my brother, so, you know, out on the road anyway. I mean, tons of people, Kristina included, behind the
Yeah.
scenes making everything happen. But you know, we were, yeah, and Jen Westall, and we were out there, and you know, just like she said, staying in parking lots, which during a pandemic, it isn't such a huge deal, right? Because people
Yeah.
weren't really working on site. So it's not
Yeah.
like the parking spots were taken up. But yeah, so anyway, that led to us coming back off the road and having an incredible, I mean, life-changing experience. I mean, I don't even know. So everything that I try and, you know, verbalize with it is understated, right? So but that trip, heading up the East Coast and getting all that footage, and meeting with all of the different people across the country that, you know, are a part of FASD advocacy, awareness, research, you know, every facet of it, and hearing all of these different perspectives, and most importantly, hearing from individuals living, you know, with FASD, was the best footage that we got. And which is saying a lot, because we got a lot of great footage with a lot of amazing professionals and a lot of people that have been in and around FASD for a very long time, doing a lot of good work. But, you know, as I've said in conferences and, you know, everywhere where I've spoken since I've received my diagnosis, is, you know, that was the eye-opening moment for me, hearing all of these different stories of everybody, and just starting to hear, you know, every day, every interview, like, that sounds like me. I have similarities to this, right? And is this just coincidence? I mean, like, is FASD one of those disabilities that walks in and out of neurotypical, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that it does as well.
Yeah.
But I just had a few too many you know, similarities to, like, not, you know, to look away from. And
I totally relate to that, Justin, because it was when I was going for training to be a facilitator or a trainer for, you know, parents to be able to work more effectively with their kids, support them more effectively. I was, you know, going through the lists of primary characteristics and even some of the secondaries, thinking, oh, I do that. Oh, I do that. Oh, that happens to me. And, you know, it was just like, and so I ended up asking my mom, did you drink when you carried me? And she's like, oh yeah, every day. Cause you know, it was the early 60s.
Yeah.
It was 11 years before Dr. Jones made his discovery.
Right.
And, yeah. And the surprise in her voice, she might as well have said, didn't everybody? Doesn't everybody? Isn't that normal?
Right.
You know, but yeah, it's one of those things that grabs you and changes you. You know, and even if it's not self-discovery or self-identification, it's, you know, it hits 1 in 20 of us. So
At
all of a
least,
sudden
if
we
not more.
might, yeah,
Yeah.
all of a sudden we may recognize, you know, some of the quirks that our neighbors have, or, you know, some of the problem kids in, you know, our kiddos' brownie troop or, you know, soccer team or whatever, you know, so that we can see people with more compassion.
Yeah, I mean, after learning about my own diagnosis and after traveling around the country, like, it was like a master class in FASD and in every facet of it, right? We
Sure.
talked about law, we talked about diagnoses, we talked about public education, we talked about everything, right? And so it was a lot of information to take in, but it was extremely fascinating. It's like so much now, so like that, after coming back and realizing, like, could I, you know, like, is there even a chance I could have, I know, you know, I know that I was an unplanned, you know, pregnancy. Myself, my mom was very young, you know, and even in the 80s, you know, I mean, still not many people were talking about FASD at the time, right? So and as even today in 2023, right? Like, you know, I mean, more people are now aware of it, but, you know, and so now I can't unsee it. I see it, like you said, I see it everywhere, and I can't help it from going through my mind. I'm in by no means, you know, like, an expert in diagnoses, but I'm just like, you just feel it. You feel like you see it,
Mhm.
and you're like, you know what I
You
mean? And I
know it when
think
you
that,
see it.
yeah, and I think that,
Yeah.
like, for me, after going, um, all around the country, both coasts, and talking to so many different people and everything, and then taking the FASD project to film festivals and having people come up to me, particularly people that are older than me. And I'm in my 40s, but like people that are older coming up and saying, is there a chance, do you think, because my parents, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, let's be real. Like if you're really talking about alcohol impacted, and, in ways that it shows up, and the whole, again, breadth of the spectrum,
Mhm.
I think the prevalence is well more than 1 in 20. And I think a lot of people, are afraid to say it out loud, but I'm not. I believe that it's much, much higher than that.
Yeah.
And I like, um, and that's why I filmed my diagnosis process as well, because I do believe that, having access, the diagnosis aspect is, it's kind of the master key to everything, right? Like it's the master key to the understanding of the prevalence,
Mhm.
to getting funds and,
Yeah.
services for this, for helping with stigma by normalizing it, by
Yeah.
people realizing, oh my gosh, this is a normal thing, that, like, you
Yeah.
know I mean,
Yeah.
if we could unlock the real numbers, right? Like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, my
Well,
neighbor,
and
all
I
my
think
neighbors.
part of that access issue is funding for the diagnostic process, because pretty much now it says you pay for it.
Mhm.
You want the diagnosis, you pony up the money.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Um, so that makes it inaccessible, even without the issue of not enough people being qualified to make the diagnosis. So it's kind of like a double whammy. Um, I know for myself, I mean, I'm 60, um, retirement's not far away, and that's got to take priority at this point. Um, or I would have been chasing down the formal diagnosis. But I think given the fact that I tick so many of the boxes and I have my mom's confession of daily use, for me, that's been good enough. Um, and I think the particular effects of it, the way it has affected my life, have not necessitated that I get services. It just means that I've learned a lot of things the hard way.
Mhm. Totally.
yeah,
A little more
Yep.
pain than needed to happen.
yeah,
Yep. Yep.
But,
yeah.
you know,
I mean, and I feel the same way. I mean, you know, like it's hard to, um, put it into words, kind of the way, looking back, that I feel about, like, I don't need I don't need services per se, but I
mm,
I would do a lot better if people around me and the world around me understood
yeah.
what my difficulties were, because it in ways it's even harder. I feel like sometimes with like, you know being on the end of the spectrum that I'm on, where it's just like, I don't believe that you have, and it's because
Mhm.
it's like, on the outside, right? Appearance is one thing, and what it looks like versus how hard things are, right?
Yeah.
And how difficult things are, and the struggle, and then also, the physical side of it. My my body's much older than my actual age is, and
Same here.
yeah, and so, I've had to learn to deal with those ailments and
Yeah.
pains and stuff,
Yeah.
in a different way, and they slow me down and they impact me greatly. But again, pain isn't something you wear on the outside, right? Or,
Exactly.
these ailments, or, if my
Yeah.
diverticulitis flares up and I can't eat for 2 days and I'm living off bone broth, like how
Mm,
tired I feel because I don't have calories.
yeah. Yeah.
But I'm also scared of going to the hospital because, it almost killed me a few years ago, so,
Mhm.
um, you know, not going to the hospital, diverticulitis, but did, but, you know,
Thanks for clarifying.
well, then again, the
The hospital saved it.
yeah, eventually,
Yes.
once they realized I wasn't a drug addict.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but,
Well, I think that,
yeah,
you know, from as his, you know, as his wife, like the siloed nature of medical and mental health
Mhm.
care, and how
Yes.
FASD is this, you know, connectedness of
Yeah.
everything. But
Yeah.
then everyone you go to, you need all these specialists, and you're too confusing for everyone. And it's just like, I've watched my husband just, you know, he doesn't look the role for someone who needs open heart surgery. He doesn't look
Yeah.
the role for someone who might have really intense endocrine stuff or
Yeah.
diverticulitis. He's too young for all these things. He doesn't have the
Yeah.
lifestyle factors to have heart problems. And he just doesn't look like what the specialists are expecting.
Yeah.
And then when he shares that he has FASD, they don't care. They say it doesn't matter. I mean, they
Yeah.
don't take it into account at all until we found really good ones at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester that absolutely did. And that, I guess, is kind of where some of the science helps, right?
Mhm.
In navigating it, that we know those heart cells are
Yeah.
there first before women
Yeah.
can even have a positive pregnancy test.
Yeah. And
So
the heart
we
cells are
know the
being
heart's going to be
impacted
hit.
by the alcohol. Mhm.
Yes. And then we know that all of these systems age. And if there's a slight dysregulation in one, inflammatory, digestive, what, you know, endocrine, whatever it is, that they will eventually all play on each other. And if that
Yeah.
manifests at age 3 or at age 33 or 53, really depends on the individual, but
Yeah.
that you will have more complicated connected problems, and you just don't look the part.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's been frustrating as his partner, to see him go through all of that and be made to feel like he's a hypochondriac, or that FASD
Mhm.
doesn't matter, or
Thank
you
you.
don't
I've
look like
been
the
called that.
FASD. Yes. And then we pay,
Yeah.
it's a lot of money, it's a lot of
Yeah.
time. How are you supposed to have a full-time job? We have little kids,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
he's married, you know, he's a husband, he's a son, he's all these things. And
Mhm.
it's just a lot of medical appointments, a lot of
Yeah.
medical bills.
Yeah.
And they don't even, it's like, you just almost need a doctor that will just do whatever you tell them you need to do, because you kind of are left on your own
Every
in a
time
lot of
I
ways.
move, I doctor shop till I find someone
Yep.
who's, you know, well, basically I have dealt with a PPO for the past umpteen years because I refuse to go through the HMO
Yep.
hoops anymore, because I mean, I have type 1 diabetes, which is a chronic illness that can turn acute on a dime.
Mhm.
I know my body better than any doctor ever will. But I very much, I have such a parallel experience with you, Justin, and I hear so much of what you're saying, Kristina. Um, yeah, and it's crazy. Both illnesses, they really should know more by now,
Mhm.
right? You know, but they're still with diabetes, they're still sending kids home from the ER saying it's just the flu. And then kids die
Yeah, that's horrible.
because, yeah, you know, and it's the same deal.
Well, I think that
So,
those comorbidities, those co-occurring conditions
mhm,
that happens, you know, so prevalently with FASD,
yeah,
don't
yeah,
necessarily play out in the normal, like the typical way. And
yeah,
so you're not easily diagnosed in these things, or something's kind of off. And then
yeah,
even some of the best of the best specialists just pass. I mean, like one of the best endocrinologists here in Colorado passed on Justin for his Hashimoto's, because
mhm,
it just wasn't making sense, you know? So then
yeah,
we go back, and we've really had a lot of luck at the Rochester, Minnesota, Mayo Clinic, and they do integrated endocrinologists with the cardiologist. They will do some integrated stuff.
mhm,
And, that makes a really big difference. And it's the first time recently that I felt like we weren't totally alone in figuring all of this
yeah,
out,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, the thing is with, you know, with someone, I feel like myself, you know, and I said this recently, I can't remember, I was giving a talk somewhere about it, and, you know, from a medical standpoint, right? It's like, um, you know, FASD is like a 27 sided Rubik's Cube that has 38 different colors, right? And it's like, and it's,
Yeah.
you know, it's some weird shape, right? Like, and you're like, hey, can you, you know, you can't, it's hard. There's no single practitioner that can help you with that, right?
Yeah.
Like, you need specialists, and it's incredibly difficult to piecemeal specialists, right? So
Mhm.
I've kind of I've in a way I've kind of given up on that, because after years of trying to do that and getting turned away or told, again, you know, the hypochondriac thing, like,
Mhm.
I mean, I think that had a play on my mental health for a lot of years, because
Yeah.
I started to believe it and then think that, like, what's wrong with me? Like, you know, am I a hypochondriac? Like, am I just feeling this stuff in my heart because I go to the heart doctor and they're dismissive to me, or like even
Mhm.
borderline rude, you know, to be
Yeah.
honest, like I'm wasting their time or something. And, you know, then I get a test on, they're like, oh no, you need open heart surgery. You have like one of the rarest congenital heart diseases in the world, or defects in the world. And so, you know, I've kind of given up the piecemealing specialists
Mhm.
together, going trying to find this endocrinologist and this, you know. I have one um, a GP now, and she's an internal medicine
Mhm.
specialist. And then everything that I do goes through the Mayo Clinic now, because they are, like Kristina said, they're
They're
integrative.
holistic.
And
Yes.
for
Yeah.
someone that is like me, that's like, you know, my cardiologist, Dr. Burchill, who's like one of the best in the country, maybe if not the world, in heart, especially, you know, like he sees these, and he listens. He knows what FASD is. He's an advocate
Mhm.
for it from Australia,
Yeah.
and gives talks on it. And so when he sees something wrong with my thyroid, he knows that that's all an important thing that he wants me to jump on top of. And
Mhm.
like Kristina said, you know, they won't even see me at, you know, the places around here. So I just went back
Yeah.
to the Mayo, and they're like, yeah, we'll make you an
Yeah.
appointment next week. And then that doctor
Yeah.
took in the information about FASD, and it's like, then it's all there in my chart, and I don't have to explain it over and over and
Yeah.
over and over again. Like, this is why this is important. This is why my
Yeah.
endocrine system is affected. You know, like for me, the
Yeah.
FASD shows up physically more than anything. You know,
Yeah.
obviously, you know, I have the mental side as well, but um,
But it's more the physical has taken more of a hit.
yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think over the long term, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
there was,
it's such a mystery, right? As to why we're all so very different one from another.
yeah,
And I think one of the confounding things for doctors is our interoception, our ability to sense what's going on internally can be jacked up one way or another, or inconsistently, because on and off applies to any of the challenges we have. Um, you know, I walked around 6 years ago, maybe it was a 7 at this point. I walked around for 7 weeks with a burst appendix. Once it finished exploding, I had no pain. You know, it was hellacious while it was blowing up,
right,
but once it was done, I felt no pain. And I was traveling for work, writing a home study up in a beautiful mountain community, which I won't name in case anyone up there might be offended, that their hospital's obviously no good for anything other than broken legs from the ski runs.
Right.
But I mean, they sent me home. They just said, "Oh, call a surgeon when you get back to Bakersfield." Okay. But I wasn't in pain, so I stayed up there the rest of the week working.
Mhm.
And by the time I saw all the different doctors that I had to see, um, you know, the first surgeon, the local surgeon, closed me up as soon as he looked in the scope into my abdomen, and closed me right up and told my husband, I think she has cancer. And when I came to, he's like, do you want Cedar Sinai or UCLA, or what's the other big one down there? USC. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I went to the diabetic team at UCLA for 10 years. They didn't get me any better. So let's try Cedars, because they have a good reputation for type 1. Yeah, except it's only on the medical floors, because the folks up on the surgical floors, they didn't know what they were doing. And if I hadn't overridden their decisions every day with my dosing, they would have killed me. So we are enigmas,
Mhm.
you know,
I think in terms of accommodations, because I just wanted to point out, because you both have said, well, I don't necessarily need, disability assistance or if I, all of these things, but I really feel like we could definitely, so when we go to, we don't live in Minnesota. So we go there, there's, hotel, air flight, we have 2 kids and rental cars, there's eating out, there's
that's
all these
expensive.
things, the extra co-pays and the medical stuff, plus, our monthly PPO.
Yeah, because you're out of area.
Yes. And so you have all of these extra costs, lost work to attend all the medical appointments and things. I do think that there should be, we talk about health equity. That's just having equity in access to healthcare. And when people are enigmas for all these things, which is FASD, that is a health disparity that creates health inequities. And
such a good point.
I really think that we should think about, if there's that classic image where there's a little kid, a bigger kid, and an adult, and they're all standing at the edge of the fence trying to watch a baseball game, and only the adult can see over the fence to see the baseball game. So the 2 kids are too short to view it. So you have to, the equity part is, how big of a box do you need to stand on so that we all can just go live our lives?
Yeah.
And when you have all these compounded medical problems,
whereas if you just get rid of the fence,
or you could get rid of the fence, yes, or we could get some FASD specialists. We have the cardiologists, the endocrinologists. I know we have a lot of professionals in FASD, but I'm talking about a high level, prestigious FASD specialist who would be an integrative health person, and they probably would be really good for other kinds of disabilities as well. But we do need something. I think everyone with a FASD diagnosis does need something,
or someone to help advocate, right?
So
Kristina, I love that idea. And I don't know if you caught the more recent episode I did with Jen Wisdahl from FASD United. But she was saying one of the projects they've been working on is with the VA, or not the VA, but the military insurance, right? And they are doing that hub and spoke model, where there's a highly sophisticated, highly trained center hub who can extend all the needed information out to the various providers in the various communities. And so it'll be really nice to see how well that works, so that other insurance companies can institute a similar model.
Right. Yeah, they have a much smaller population they serve than the general United States. So it's a great place to experiment. We were at a conference in September there on the Capitol Hill Day with FASD United and Jen Wisdahl there. So Justin spoke at that event where the DoD was talking about their recent findings in September 2023. And they were saying that because military families move so much, that actually that is their biggest issue. So even if you had this, hub and spoke kind of model, that how do you accommodate all of the movement in the military?
With some very long spokes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, it's an enclosed system, so it doesn't matter how much the pieces are moving around inside of it. That the treatment overall is a microsystem, right? So it's its own micro everything, right? So it's actually a perfect place where, just like in the history of everything United States, all of this stuff comes from the military. They lead everything for, it's the reason why we have cell phones and a lot of the technology we have. It all starts in the military. So and because it's an enclosed system, they just, again, it circles back to the punitive thing, right? Which is, if you can't be thrown in jail or have an punitive approach if you come and say that you were, anyway. So, that's a whole nother talking point for the military to figure out. But again, it's reflective upon our more general society with stigma and all that stuff as well. It's like, people can't get in trouble. They shouldn't be getting in trouble for coming forward and talking about
Yeah.
these things so that they can get the services for their kids without fear of punitive effects.
My career started in addictions treatment in Newport News, Virginia, where a lot of my clients were from the base. And a lot of them were from the shipyards. And, it was basically you go to the hospital and do your treatment or you're done. Right. So, but that doesn't keep people from wanting the help and wanting to change and having those very real needs. Kristina, you mentioned a little while ago about how we seem to prematurely age. And I had read, I mentioned this in my conversation with Christy Petrenko the other day, that I had read an article on LinkedIn that was talking about premature aging being a function of the mitochondrial in our gut and the killer T cells, those two pieces running amok. And I'm wondering, has there been any research looking at those two factors with FASD?
No, not that I'm aware of, maybe in some animal models recently, but no, a lot of so aging is driven by so many different systems. I mean, that's your gut, just in this year in 2023, we've seen a lot of high impact journal peer-reviewed publications saying that perhaps mental health symptomology and severity of that symptomology is more related to our gut biome than it is our brain, which I think is wild. So I do think you're absolutely on to a very unexplored area, Patty, because so many people living with FASD need a blended meal or have digestive issues. And if we already know that just in our general population with more difficult to treat mental health problems, if it's coming a large proportion or, a lot, maybe all of it, who knows, in the gut, that, back in the 60s, we had really prominent leaders in our government who were into pharmacology. And that's why we have been so brain neurotransmitter focused. And I think it's really time for us to come back and look at the whole picture and not just live in the brain all the time and see the brain is driving everything. Absolutely. Our body it's bidirectional. And so I think that is something that needs to be better understood. Also, when we talk about mental health disorders being, the thing that almost all people with lived experience with FASD have struggled with at one point in time at a much higher prevalence rate than the general population, we still don't know that depressive symptoms or that are being diagnosed as depression are actually depression, right? And I've heard like CJ with the FASD Changemakers, which Justin's part of now, that joined earlier this year in 2023.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Yes, I know. Wonderful group. And I know CJ has also shared that maybe it's just, it's like more of a flare up that you just get exhausted, you get worn out. And there's just like, you just need a down day. And then that can look like, do you ever have days where you can't move out of bed and, and it's just like, well, sure. But is that FASD or is that depression? Or is it both? And I think we haven't done FASD justice, in that, and really focusing I'm a developmental neuroscientist, and I'm saying we need to kind of get out of the brain. We've already documented that the brain is altered. We now start to help like just more tangible things. And that's how, I guess, to go back to your original question that we started with, having now gone through and having lived experience that kind of came out of the fact that was my research program, and it has completely revolutionized my research program. I mean, I just see how limited and flawed research has been, and how we really need to, autism 20 years ago was
where we are now,
nonverbal. And that's where we are with FASD, is we're just realizing, we've been looking at facial dysmorphology or kids who were really struggling with academics and behavior and mood regulation already in kindergarten. But these kids are not living with birth parents. They've been through adverse childhood events. They have not had a secure bonded attachment often early on in life
Yeah,
before
because
they
80% are raised
Yes.
by other, someone other than parents.
Well, that's in research. I don't think that's in the general population. I
Okay.
actually think in the general population, most people with FASD are raised by their biological parents. And
Okay.
that is coming from the Adolescent Brain Cognitive Development Study, which we have 11,888 kids we've been following for up to 10 years. We're in year 7. And this is a quote unquote neurotypical, what does the average brain from age 9 to 10 look like till 1920? And 27.8% of those kids participating in our study, almost 12,000 of them, they're all with biological parents. There's some adopted, but the major majority are with biological parents, and 27.8% of them, their mothers, biological mothers, endorse some prenatal alcohol exposure.
Okay.
And then that is already showing an ABCD to be related to psychiatric symptomology, white matter in the brain, brain structure, and some substance use. And so just exploring substance use in adolescents.
Okay.
And so, I mean, do they have FASD? Are they, that's a whole nother thing. But I think that is probably the other side of the spectrum. And that's kind of, how Justin's lived experience has really transformed.
Now that I've talked to you, I'll have to change one of the stats in my book.
Oh, well, but that is an accurate stat today. I just think that won't be accurate in a year once more publications get out. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to seeing all those. And I love to hear that because, when I interact with DHS or Department of Human Services, they're like, well, where'd you get that statistic? Well, it's out there.
Well, I think DHS, foster care and juvenile delinquency is where you're going to see these high rates of FASD. But I don't think that is necessarily like the whole population of people.
Yeah.
But it is to be determined, right?
Yeah. And I wanted to go back to your question as well about the premature aging thing. And I mean, it's not necessarily that we actually are prematurely aging.
It's
that we're symptomatic of that, right? Like diverticulitis, endocrine problems, something the common amongst people with FASD, right? Gut issues and things like that, right? So, and that has a play on your mental health, right? Your gut biome, all of that. But like a majority of older people at some point, in later years, late 70s, 80s, and stuff like that, will have diverticulosis. It's very common, right?
Yeah.
It's not as common for a 30-something-year-old to have diverticulitis, which is a severe infection. But you know what I mean? It's like we have these symptoms, heart symptoms, gut problems, and obviously with calcium and bone structure, obviously alcohol has it, it has a play on our developing bone systems, just from the inhibiting calcium uptake, right? So when
oxidative stress on all these systems that are developing.
So I mean, I think the thing is, it's just like, that's it. It's not that like we're necessarily, my body is 42 years old, obviously, right? Like it's the age that I am. It's just that I have these symptoms earlier and more severe than other people do, right?
And thank you for clarifying that, because, prematurely aging was an incorrect way of phrasing it. We are at a younger age facing some of the medical conditions typically faced by older people.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't know how lifespan's impacted by FASD. I mean, these are like really
beyond 34.
Yeah. People with FASD, that's like a lot of people ask that. And it's like, no one's done that before because everyone's been focused on mom drinking and preventing it, or focused on, babies, toddlers, children. And then poof, it's just like, there's not a lot after that. I mean, there's becoming more and more, but We
Yeah,
don't know.
people don't think about it being a lifelong condition.
Right.
But and that whole 30 beyond 34, I think my first conversation with Jen Wisdall that we were going to do, or they were actually going to do a t-shirt with that beyond 34,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
contradict that one solitary study that said the average lifespan is 34.
Well, and that
Um,
was exclusively that study, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, was exclusively focused also on fetal alcohol syndrome. And you have
uh-huh.
to remember the time period in which that study was published is when we thought the face was FASD. The
Yeah.
face was everything. The face was the window into the brain insult. And therefore, that was the severity when really it's just an indicator of a certain timing with
Yeah.
a reasonable dose at that developmental stage.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, it's interesting. I guess I
People are
also,
always so surprised when I tell them that.
yeah, I would like to just, I guess, one more thing I wanted to say about the, health disparities and health inequities is that we have all these co-occurring conditions with FASD that are challenging to navigate, but maybe we could not make you land in the hospital with diverticulitis if we had known at that time that you had a FASD diagnosis. And then of course scientifically we were educated enough to know that GI issues are one of the things, and then we could take it really seriously before it gets too bad, and we could communicate it to the staff when we get into the hospital. But we didn't have a diagnosis at that time. And then now that we do have a diagnosis, very few medical providers take that and know what to do with that.
Right.
So maybe we wouldn't
Right.
have so many complex, compounding things if the medical field was more prepared to
Mhm.
actually be effective at helping people and adults specifically with FASD and
Yeah. Yeah.
all of these things. Yeah. Maybe it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be that bad, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it could
I
be
would
better.
agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there's been a couple times so far that I've walked up to that line of adding to that statistic of young age not being here, and even that diverticulitis experience.
Mhm.
I had no idea what it was. Obviously, I thought maybe my appendix had burst. I'd never experienced pain like that before,
Yeah.
and I had decided by the time I had decided to go to the emergency room, I had a 104 fever. And I couldn't, I was crawling out of my skin in pain. And so I'm in the ER in LA, and I'm walking around like with this look on my face, and I was doing like deep breathing, like, because I was just like, and I was like verbalizing, and I was freaking people out, and I didn't even realize it. Right. And they called security in, and this guy was standing right next, and none of it even dawned on me that like, oh, they probably think I'm like coming down from something, so a drug, which they clearly did, because I'm telling you, I got there at like 3 o'clock, I want to say. They didn't admit me in until almost 9 o'clock. And then the doctor, they did my blood, and I had sepsis really bad. And I was very near, like, not
Death.
doing like,
They
being
told
done.
you to call your loved ones.
They did. She told me to call. And she also said, "Why did you wait so long to come in?" I said, "I was in the waiting room for
I've
5
been
hours."
here for
And she got really upset, and then went and talked to but again, I had to go through all that. If I could have just walked up to the desk and say, "Hey, I've got a disability, something's wrong with me, I have health problems, I need to be seen right now," you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if I'd have known how to advocate for like that, if I'd even had an inkling of an idea, again, I wouldn't have even brushed up against almost not making it. So, and then again with my heart too, it's like, I had been going to the hard doctor my whole life, and then they tell you, like, you're fine, you're young, you're healthy, you're a runner, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, but my heart hurts.
Yeah.
Trust me, I'm not lying, my heart hurts. And anyway, so but it's one of those things that it's like, that's really where, again, when we talk about focusing in on facial dysmorphology, I mean, and all of that, and it's not the way, because so many people are impacted that
Yeah.
would slip through the cracks otherwise. And it's also the reason why we have to get awareness out there
Yeah.
and make diagnosing accessible to people everywhere, and not make it be so expensive and complicated. There needs to be a gold standard. And, but I mean, all of that is moot until people know what it is. So, it's kind of this,
I talk to a lot of parents who feel like, they raise these concerns and then they even ask about, what could be going on. Could it be the alcohol, blah, blah, blah. And they're shined on. And, what I hear a lot of parents saying is they feel like they're being gaslit by the medical community.
Absolutely.
And that's their perception, and deservedly so, because of what we've had to go through. We totally get it and totally know where they're coming from. But I think the reality is there's so much for a doctor to learn in so little time. I mean, they go to school for a decade, but that's still not much time given all that they need to master. And when the information on FASD they have is old or incorrect, if you combine that with ego, because a lot of the older doctors, I haven't experienced it with the newly graduated crop of doctors, but the old school ones, they're very egotistical. They have the staff that say, "Doctor will see you now." Doctor Who?
They don't want to be told. They don't want to be told what you think is going on, or oh, you Google that. I will say that
I am the expert.
I had a student that Layla and we looked and carefully went through all of the questions that and the study guides that medical doctors are, will face when they go to get their licensure. And the general medical license does not ask about FASD. So you have to be one of 3 specialties to even get an item about that question. And then even though we have 2.5 or more prevalence of FASD than autism spectrum disorder, there's about 6 to 7 questions on autism spectrum disorder for every one on FASD. So, we just, your average cardiologist isn't facing FASD anywhere in the training. And so if we could just, if we,
my cardiologist was like, "What are you telling me for?" Because you should know.
I have pushed back to some people who are high up in that world and sit on these boards that deem, what it, satisfies licensure for medical providers and their licensure. And they said that it's just very political. The people that are sitting in these positions have been there for a very long time. And if you ask them to change it and you're constructively critical, you are telling them they didn't do their job very well for the last 20, 30 years.
And that's very threatening to their egos.
It is threatening to their egos. And if I'm going to be provocative, it's what I see in FASD research as well. The people who still hold a lot of the power and a lot of the funding and get to pick who newbies come up and all of these things still don't want to shift this narrative of FASD, that it could be any and all of us, and that we've been overly narrow on understanding what it is, because that they're about to retire and that negates their life work. Not all FASD researchers who are about to retire or have retired are like this. There's some who are phenomenal, like Ken Jones, Joanne Weinberg. They're at the cutting edge, right, with everyone else. But a lot of them still are very threatened that they're going to retire and their whole life's work is going to be irrelevant.
And I think the same thing for other systems of care. If you look at social services, if you look at regional center, if you look at mental health, the people that are at the top of the food chain in each locality of that particular system, if they were to look in the mirror and honestly admit that FASD is so much bigger than they had ever imagined. That's a tough one to face.
But it's the reality. The only way to just be vulnerable, accept that, and end on a high note, and be part of that change that people living with
Yes.
FASD so desperately need from
Yeah.
the academic community and the medical community. They're very connected.
Yeah.
So yes,
I
okay.
couldn't have said it better. That was beautiful.
You
That was
too.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So we've been at this for an hour already. The time has absolutely flown. But Justin, I just wanted to tell you how much it meant to me a year ago at the FASD Now conference when I was sharing, I'm not so sure about who to tell, how to tell, why to tell, because I'm a professional and I just, it feels like coming out, right?
Totally.
And, and you very providentially said, the only way past the stigma is straight through it. And I am so thankful to you, my friend, for saying that.
Yeah.
Never in a million years would I imagine that I would have written a book or gotten a podcast going. And so I owe all that to you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very humbling, and you know, and you're doing the great work, Patty. You're doing amazing advocacy, and you're walking the walk, instead of just talking the talk. And again, I felt, just to empathize with what you said, when I first shared my diagnosis, because it took me a while to I'll be honest, I cried when I got the news, not because they were tears of relief, I guess. And I think because I think I knew, and but then it was validated, and then when I first shared it in public, it was kind of on a whim, on a Proof Alliance conference.
Or gala.
No,
gala.
No, it was an online conference.
Oh yeah,
that they were hosting.
Okay.
And I just decided to go ahead and say it, and there was like a couple hundred people on there, and you can't even see their faces, and I'm like, but then, and I was unsure even after that. I was like, but I'm like, me just keeping this to myself is not going to help others. And and who cares if people look at me or judge me or think whatever of me. And people are going to. It's just the way that it is with this, and that's unfortunate, but that will change. And that's just disability in general, not only FASD, right? And
and not just invisible disabilities, but disabilities in general.
Exactly.
You're right.
And so,
but it is a bit tougher for those of us who, you can't see the evidence.
Yeah, right. I know. And I think that there's that aspect too, that people question it, do you really, and it's but the reality is us accepting it and owning it and coming out normalizes it. It allows others that maybe are having similar thoughts, I mean, it was amazing at, and I won't go too long in this, but at the FASD United, event that we were just at in September, I got to see a lot of great people that I really bonded with on our trip originally, like Barb Clark being one of them, and other people talking about really just taking another look at this from a whole nother angle. And it's really kind of cool, right now, and talking to Tom Donaldson as well. It's just it really feels like, and this is why I want to get back, and I was motivated to begin filming again and get that whole process going again, is because it really feels as though, the topic of it, the advocacy, the awareness, the political side, the maybe not the medical side yet,
feeling
but
like the time is at hand.
It's, things are happening, and it feels like we're on the precipice of something.
We're on the cusp.
I'm sure it's felt this way before for many people that have been at this for a long time, but I feel like, with stories like yours, stories like mine, with, all these amazing people around us to help us through it and help us, we can all help each other and push this thing forward. And So
I
yeah,
will say
thank
that
you.
my doctoral training with Joanne Weinberg, who is phenomenal FASD researcher, and everyone in the lab, they all know Justin really well. We were dating, we got engaged, we had an engagement party with them, then they threw us a baby shower after we had a baby
Oh,
after we got married. So like this lab, everyone knows us really well. None of us in 1,000 years suspected that Justin could actually be diagnosable. And here we're studying it. And that, he just got
yeah.
diagnosed in 2021. So I'm just saying that a lot of people are realizing how big this spectrum is. And I think that is going to be super key
Yeah.
to really plowing right through that stigma.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Normalizing it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's the work that you're doing, and
Yeah.
I appreciate that very, very much. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to have you guys back on again sometime.
Absolutely, we'd love to.
Okay.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, this won't be airing for a while, but I'm going to wish you guys a happy Thanksgiving anyway.
Thank you. You too.
Likewise.
So I'll just say happy holidays, because then it wraps in Christmas and New Year's too.
There you go. And it's the holidays. We got our Christmas lights up
I
already.
know.
Yeah. I see there's this the plants they look like half the leaves are green and half are blue.
Oh, funny.
So
Yep,
all
we
right.
like to get after it early. Well, happy holidays to you and yours as well, Patty. We
Okay.
appreciate you having us on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if either of you are open to being contacted by anyone in the audience, please shoot me what contact information you want to be in the show notes.
Yeah. My email is Cuban with a K. So KUBAN at UCI.edu. That's University of California, Irvine.edu.
All right.
And if you want to get a hold of me,
just email me and I'll get you a hold of him.
the best way.
That's
Awesome.
other duties as assigned, right?
Yeah.
That's what we wives do.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Kristina,
like
do you make all his
23,000
medical appointments? Because I make all my husband's.
Oh no,
No?
I help sometimes make medical appointments, and like, well, when there's been like ADHD med shortages and we're trying to figure out where now to get things like, or there's clearly something going on with his heart, then yes, I will get very loud in these situations. But in general, I don't make the appointments.
Yeah, but she's my Google
Secretary?
Calendar, like,
There you
to be
go.
like, oh, you have a meeting, an ALC meeting tomorrow at 11, or it's like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, I know. Oh God, thank God she told me, because
ALC is the
adult leadership collaboration.
Yeah.
It seems like more people that I interviewed in this book are on the ALC than not.
Oh.
So
cool.
And not everyone was on the ALC when I started that project.
Sure.
But several had been inducted by the time the book went to publishing, which was only 6 months later.
Yeah.
So cool.
So, but
yeah, they're an awesome group. I'm very, very proud to be a member with them, and they really are doing amazing stuff. So happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, that would, if I had time, then I would say pick me. But this isn't quite the time.
It is a lot. They have a lot of meetings. It is a time commitment.
Yeah. I'm trying to do a lot of stuff, and
they are. They're
a lot going on.
Yep. All right. Well,
but all good stuff.
Have a good evening, you two.
Thank you. You too.
And happy holidays. And we will be in touch, and I will make sure I get you, stuff to help promote this, so that all of our networks can share in our candid conversation. So, all right. So to everyone listening or watching, I just can't believe the hour's gone and then some. But don't forget to come back to the YouTube channel on Friday for another free Friday tidbit. And come back again next Monday for yet another episode of Living with FASD. And in the meantime, you saw me waving the book a couple times. It's written for those who are wondering, why has my life been hard? Why is it hard for me to do things that other people seem to do easily? So if I'm speaking to you, or if I'm speaking about someone that you know well, you might pick up a copy and send it their way. Because in the pages, you may recognize yourself and may recognize because everyone's stories are different, you may recognize, I wonder if alcohol had something to do with my life struggles, just the way Justin experienced it and I experienced. So Sip by Sip, candid conversations with people diagnosed as adults with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders on Amazon, or get your local bookseller to order it in if you like supporting local business, which is always a good thing. And keep sharing Living with FASD to get other people listening and learning about FASD. Everybody have a great week, and we'll see you back next Monday for another episode. Bye-bye.